My name's Carey. I'm in Wisconsin, of course, and I'm doing a study, research on the UFO crash at Roswell. And I've talked with Don Schmitt on an occasion. I had him and Stanton Friedman. Have you heard of Stanton Friedman?
Okay, excuse me. I got an old tape recorder. I put it's got a small microphone on it. Hello, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
What's this study about, sir? Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Okay, I'm studying UFOs. Well, one day. I'll tell you what happened. I don't know. Well, one day here at home, I was watching this movie, and it was called Love Goddess. It was about Rita Hayworth. And after the movie was over, it was 1:20 a.m. in the morning, and the telephone rang here. It was I found out later it was December 17th, 1987, and there was these voices speaking, and it sounded like a couple voices superimposed over top each other, and they were speaking in English, or at least that's what they sounded like, and I didn't know what the heck it was, and I said, well, who is this? And it was just like, there was a conversation going on, but not talking to me. And at the very end of it, they said something like they were from outer space, and then there was just nothing. I thought, well, was this somebody playing a prank on me, like a friend of mine? Okay, and that's what I thought it was for a long time, because I was studying anomalies. Have you ever? I started getting into crop circles too, but I don't believe that they're caused. I don't know if they're caused by UFOs or not. I'm not really a believer in UFOs. I'm a skeptic, but I'm just accumulating data. Okay, now the reason I got into Roswell thing is because after I got the telephone call, I wondered what it was, probably just a prank, but I said, well, what has Hayworth got to do with UFOs? Well, I did some studying, and I found out that her ex-husband was Orson Welles, and he did the War of Worlds, so I thought, well, that's an interesting coincidence. And then I discovered that her name was written, or Gilda, G-I-L-D-A, was written on the atomic bomb that was dropped at Bikini Atoll, and that Roger Raymond and Blanchard were on board that plane with Woody Soncut from the 509th that dropped that bomb. And I thought, well, that's an interesting coincidence. So when I discovered that, then that's why I got into the Roswell UFO crash instead of the 12,618 sightings that were in Project Blue Book alone. And then there's a number of UFO sightings since December 17, 1969. See, so you got December 17, 69 when they closed Blue Book, and then this December 17, 87 I got that call. But I don't know what that call was. It's just that's what more or less got me into the Roswell thing instead of any of the other UFO sightings. And then there was up here outside of Richmond Center, where I'm about 12 miles from Richmond Center, there was a case where John Salter, he was supposedly a professor coming from North Dakota with his son, going to New Orleans to deliver a lecture, and that he got supposedly, I don't know what to think about these abduction phenomenon. I don't know what to think about it. But this guy was abducted with his son right outside of Richmond Center, about 2 miles on a road where I used to hang out all the time, about 800 feet from where we used to hang out as kids all the time. And I thought, well, what's going on, you know? It's probably just all coincidence. And since I study coincidence, have you ever heard of Carl Jung? He did a thing called synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, where something happens in your life, it's meaningful. Like you might think of somebody, and then that person calls, you haven't seen him for 20 years. I've been studying coincidence for a long time. And then there was this book called Out There, written by Howard Bloom. It's about, are you familiar with that book? We had a cousin, a woman, who was a blood descendant, or she would be my father's dad's brother's girl. When my father died March 21st, 1991, and we were looking for these people because we were going to have a reunion. And we didn't know where they were at. We didn't know what state they were in, but we were sending out invitations to all over the United States, inviting people to come to this reunion in Iowa, Strawberry Point. So we were looking for that. Nobody knew how to locate them, and they were blood relatives. So we're looking, can't find them, and then the reunion comes and goes, and then on February 29th, she calls up from Chippewa Falls, which is from where this Tom Weber, who on that UFO landing strip, was from. But I didn't realize it at the time. And then later, when I was looking through the book, here I see her name, and she turns out to be the treasurer on his UFO Site Center Corporation committee. I couldn't believe that, because here I was into UFOlogy, and now here I got a relative. We didn't know where she was at. She's on a UFO committee. In this book, which is a book I was looking for when I discovered this book called Majestic by Stryber, which is about Roswell. So that's another reason why I thought I'd get into Roswell. And then I started calling up Don Schmitt, and I had him out. I went to a meeting, and he autographed my book, and then we've been in communication since. And I'd called up James Barron. He's from Muscatine. That's another coincidence I discovered. He was at Roswell. He lives in Arizona now. I just talked to him a couple nights ago, and we were talking about some people I'd talked to. See, he'd give me a few names of guys that were there. One of them was, I finally got hold of him, Elmer Tixier, Touche, T-I-X-I-E-R. And he told me about a UFO that he had seen on their way up to Albuquerque to load up atomic weapons at Kirtland. They were come from Roswell. They arrived early, and they had to park their plane for a while. They just laid back and looked up in the sky, and then they saw this little gray disc flying around, and they wondered what the heck. Well, of course, you guys have been seeing them down there for a while, so that's the first one he saw, he said.
Better off than I've never seen one.
You've never seen one?
No.
Okay, well, then he was sitting there watching, and then they saw this, what they called the mothership, about a quarter the size of the moon, and then they saw 5 more of them come down outside, or come out of that while they were sitting there watching this thing. And they said that they flew up and down the valley, these little ones, where you don't know. And did that for about 10 or 15 minutes, they said, or he said, but he can't remember any of the individuals that were on that plane. And then the navigator went inside the B-29 in the plexiglass area of it, and he shot it with a sextant. He said there was a star where there wasn't supposed to be a star, or he said that object was at where there shouldn't be a star. And this Elmer Touche, he looked at that as verification. And then he heard about a guy that he knows, but he's bad with names. And the only person he can remember was Major Llewellyn. But you ever heard of Major Llewellyn?
Yep.
Was he in the 393rd?
Oh boy. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was in the engineering squadron. You're trying to pick my brain back 45 years ago on specific names, and without looking in my yearbook, I'd never be able to come up with other than those that I associated with all the time.
Okay. Anyway, that is the only name that he could remember. But what I'm leading up to is that he said that he had heard, or he has a friend of his lives somewhere in Albuquerque there, who was in Roswell. He said Walkerfield, Roswell, and of course they're the same. And he said that this individual had been talking to him about through the years about a crashed B-29 that crashed in Roswell, around in Roswell there someplace, and it had weapons on it, and it was in, this is his words, conjunction with the UFO sighting, and that's the first time I ever heard anything about anything like that.
That's the first time I've heard it also. To the best of my recollection, we didn't have the 29 crash anywhere in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Now this friend of mine, James Barron, he was on a B-29 crash. It crashed 6 miles outside of Roswell. See, I've got the newspaper clippings of it, but it was August 12, 1948. And he said that it was a major, I think it was Wills, that had given them more flap than what they were seeing. This guy was green co-pilot, and that's what happened in that instance. And I said I'd never heard of any kind of UFO crash. I mean a B-29 crash in conjunction to a UFO sighting. And I said, even if you did, there was no proof that there was any intent. Maybe it's rumor. This Elmer, I don't know if he said he didn't know for sure, and he said, but that's what he remembered. Then he could.
Right, let me ask you one other question. What is your last name?
Arbegust, Arbegust. UST. Okay. I tried. You said that so fast on that message last night. I ran the thing back about 5 times. I still didn't get it. Okay.
And you're from where?
Muscoda. Muscoda.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I talked to Slusher, Robert Slusher. Yeah, he was on the special flight. I imagine you've read that UFO Crash at Roswell, right? That book? He was on that special flight on 7301. That Schmitt now has reason to believe, I guess he said that might have been a diversion.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like I'm not cooperative, but
yeah.
My only actual knowledge is what I did, and that was simply to put out a press release on the orders of the commanding officer. We never discussed it thereafter. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
The story that came out of Fort Worth by Raymond put an end to it as far as most of us on the station were concerned, because apparently there was just a small contingency of people that knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was not privy to that because they were trying apparently to keep things quiet, and you don't tell a public relations officer something if you want it quiet. Not to make noise about these events or anything else that happens. They want notoriety. Apparently they did not want any, so I was just kind of cut out of the I don't remember going to the staff meeting that they had the following morning.
Yeah.
I think Don or Kevin Randall, one or the others, feels that there's a possibility I was there. I sure don't remember it.
Oh, you don't recall that?
No. And I think I would have remembered something of that magnitude where they discussed it.
Well, if in your mind, when you heard that story and then you printed the story up, what did you think? And then after all these years, knowing that what you do now, what's your opinion now?
Well, let's go back. The time when I wrote the story and took it into town, there had been sightings prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, in my own mind, I was thinking, oh boy, we're going to be like everybody else, pie in the sky type of thing. And when the story came out of Fort Worth by Ramey that it was over, I think probably, it's hard to remember exactly what your thoughts were 45 years ago.
Oh, sure.
Something to the effect, am I glad that's over? We got off fairly easy. And subsequently, up until 1980, well, about 1979, when Stan Friedman first called me, I had completely forgotten the incident. I just took it as something that had happened. quite quickly by Raymond. That was the end of it. And Stan came down and talked to me. I spent many, many hours with he and I think every other researcher in the country. Tell them all the same story.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. I didn't see anything. I was never told anything. I'm one of the soundest witnesses they have, but I don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't change my story either. It stays the same because that's what happened.
Right. Okay. There's a few names, like you said that you had a book there, right, that has a list of names?
Yeah, I've got the
47 yearbook. Okay, it's 8:36 p.m. Do you recall, okay, now I called up I just called a Charles A. McGee. He was in Special Operations. Did you recall his name? Okay, he told me that he was in there in April 48, spring of 48, and he said that his information, to his knowledge, that he knew that there was investigative excursions up there until about sometime in 1949, then they closed the book on it. That's what he told me, and I've since discussed this with Stanton and Don Schmitt, and they are both have an interest in the man. They're going to call him and talk to him, because if it was just I asked him, I said, if that's a long time to pick up some debris from a balloon. He said, yeah, and I said, what do you think it was? And he said, I thought it was a cover-up. And this guy was the first guy to contact him, and then he said, later when I run some names by him, on that special flight, he recognized all them men. And then later he finally said that he was going to the headquarters one day, and he said, I guess I was in a place at the wrong time, or at the right time, how it depends on how you look at it, and he overheard a conversation in the headquarters building to the effect that they were sending investigative teams up there still. But he said what they found, when they found it, where they found it, he didn't know what it was, and the information he received was not for his information. And then he after that was all done, and I said, can you name them individuals you'd overheard? And he said no, he wouldn't quote them, no, he wouldn't quote them, no, he wouldn't quote them. And I said, well, you're not filing any oaths or anything, right? Because I didn't want him to be uncomfortable. And he said no. He said the information I heard was not from my information. I overheard a conversation. It was rumors. And then I said, well, of all the men names I named tonight, can you say that any of those individuals were involved that you overheard? And he said, yeah, I'd have to say they were. And then I said, well, could you recommend, I said, I don't know who to get a hold of now. Can you recommend anybody I should call and talk to verify? And he said, get a hold of Josie Shackelford and Lieutenant Gerald F. Anderson. Have you heard of either one of them? I call it
Shackelford?
Yeah, Joe Carl Shackelford.
That is Shackelford still lives here.
Yeah, I called a guy down there. He said he's not related.
What's the other one,
Gerald, First Lieutenant Gerald F. Anderson. Jerry Anderson.
You know, at that time we had probably about 5,000 people on station.
Yeah.
You didn't know everybody. And just one of those things that a lot of these names, I might, if I went back to my annual here, I might be able to spot somebody, but it's a very difficult thing because a lot of them, they just show the picture of flight crew and have the names underneath them. And it takes hours and hours and hours to do it.
Yeah. Do you, Stanton has got a computer list of these men, and I called him up here about it was April 9th, and we were running through a few names that I run across, and he tell me that whether they're the 393rd, the 715th, or 830th. Did you ever hear of Harry Hart?
Hart?
Yeah. Okay. He lives there in Roswell yet. I called him up the other night, and he said that they were warned not to say anything. That again was, consistent, and it's why you'd be warned not to say anything about a weather balloon. I don't know.
There are a lot of questions of the same type on why they covered the whole thing up, and it's just, I think everybody that has any knowledge of this subject here in Roswell feel the same way, that it was a cover-up, and were we kidding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I understand, you talked to Jesse Marcel.
Yes. Senior, junior.
And can you run that by me just shortly, what Jesse told you? Or how did it come about that he trusted in you to tell you the story?
Well, he came here in 1980. He was brought here by Johnny Mann, who was doing a videotape on UFOs for a TV station in New Orleans. And he brought Jesse over here to have Jesse go out and show him where the debris field was. And we were staying at the Roswell Inn, and I was also interviewed by him. They came back from the debris field, and I went over to the Roswell Inn and called Jesse's room and talked to him. He used to live a block down from me here.
Man?
No, Jesse Marcel.
Okay.
And we started talking, and I asked him a couple of questions, and his answer to the general question was that was nothing of this Earth. We had nothing at that time on this planet that was anything like the materials that we picked up. And he had made the same comment in the videotape.
Yeah, I've got a tape that has his comment on there. I just wanted to hear you say it. See, what I'm skeptical of the whole thing, but I know there's something going on here because all these men would be saying this. But to think that it's an extraterrestrial vehicle, I'm Stan Friedman's convinced, and Don Schmitt's convinced, and I'm becoming convinced, but
people like Jesse had absolutely no reason to make statements like that unless it was true, or that was what his belief was.
Yeah.
He was a well-educated individual.
That's what I find so hard to believe about this, is that this here's an elite group of men stationed at the only atomic bomb wing in the world. They can't be a bunch of nuts, they gotta be highly educated. And the whole story, that Raymond thing makes them out to look like they could be fooled by a weather balloon.
That's another, I think, fallacy. That material was taken into headquarters, and in headquarters you had Colonel Blanchard, who was a bird colonel. P. Jennings was up there. He was a lieutenant colonel. Bob Barcliffe was there. This is what I gather. And I don't know who else was up there, but all these guys were, I believe all of them were command pilots. As such, they would have a pretty good idea what a weather balloon was, and if nothing else, they would have seen a picture of it. I'm being facetious about it.
Mm-hmm.
They were all top echelon commanders, and I'm sure that each and every one of them had at one time or another seen a weather balloon up close. Or a weather balloon, they would have said, "Hey, look, Haut put out a story that was a weather balloon that was found out near Corona. Not tell me that it was a flying saucer."
Yeah, just like the one that they found in Circleville, Ohio, remember? And on July 5th, 1947, and that person who reported to the sheriff immediately identified as a weather balloon, said you can have it.
I think you got to take into account the fact that Brazil, the rancher, he had picked up weather balloons and turned them back to the military to get the reward. I think they paid $25 for something. I don't know exactly the amount. He certainly, having picked up weather balloons and taken them back to the military when he went to town, would have known what a weather balloon looked like. And at least had an inclination, even if it was a new type.
Yeah, well, they said you couldn't burn or cut or...
You take a little piece of it, real thin foil-like stuff, and crumbled up in your hand, and when you open your hand, it sprang back into a very flat surface, no wrinkles or anything else in it.
Yeah, and when Marcel said you couldn't dent it with a 16-pound sledgehammer, you mean they couldn't flatten it out even thinner than it already was, or couldn't break the surface?
It was on one of the, what they call the I-beams. He put that on one of these bumpers to stop cars from going beyond where they're supposed to in parking lots. He put on one end on it, and it's a piece about 2 feet long. They pounded with a 16-pound sledge, and it just bounced off of there.
Yeah, and that'd be the piece that would go into a weather balloon.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
My friend, this is costing me money.
Yeah. Well, I can call you back.
No, I've got an appointment at 8 o'clock. That's why I called you when I did.
Okay. Could I ask you just a couple questions real quick? Do you remember a co-pilot or a pilot, Izzard, I-Z-Z-A-R-D?
Yeah, Ray Izzard.
Ray Izzard?
Yes, Raymond.
Raymond?
Raymond.
Raymond?
I said Raymond. He always went by Ray, R-A-Y, I-Z-Z-A-R-D.
Do you know where he's at?
Oh, he's dead.
Oh, really?
Hey, you know where Ray Izzard is? Is he dead? He's dead.
Oh, shoot. Okay, was Marcel, when he was living in Houma, Louisiana, before he come back to Roswell to do that film, was he stationed, or had he ever worked at Houma Air Base down there?
That I don't have any idea.
Okay. Well,
that's where his family, where they all went after this was over with.
Oh, his family's from there. Did you ever hear of a Jimmy Johnson?
I'm hesitating because Johnson is a real common name, and I've heard of a Jimmy Johnson, but I can't tie anything with it.
What about a Julian P. Johnson?
No.
Okay, well, I don't want to run your bill up any bigger than it is, and I was going to suggest when you first called that I called you right back, so, we could, No,
I try and cooperate with anybody I can, but my knowledge of this whole thing is so limited, other than what I have subsequently learned by reading articles from Stan Friedman and books and the like, that the only thing that I can do is answer questions, and most of them I can't give you an answer to because I don't know.
Okay, well, what about...
I try to help anybody I can, but I just can't... I can't make up a story.
Oh, I don't want you to...
Try and get notoriety. I get enough of it without it.
Yeah, I don't want you to make up a story. I just want the facts, sir.
That's what I try and give you. What I personally know, I can tell you. But if anything beyond that, I will tell you that I've read about it or like it.
Have you ever received any telephone calls from your compatriots that were stationed with you in 47 after the fact that you went public to tell you personally what they knew?
No, I did not.
That's interesting, don't you think, that they haven't? I'm just wondering how many of these individuals have even seen the movies and the documentaries and you and Friedman and the other people that have came forward on television. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't know. Well.
That's about all I can give you.
Okay, well, I really appreciate this, Mr. Haut, for calling, okay?
All right.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Sure.
Okay, it's 8:50 p.m. April 15th, 1992. That was Walter G. Haut called me from Roswell.